How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by a coach with over 25 years experience of coaching and competing in strength sports. He's also the founder of Barbell Logic. Today, I am joined by the one and only Matt Reynolds. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much. Thank you for that intro. It's a little bit, I know you've had a lot of people on your show who have been or still are a lot stronger than me. And so I definitely got started in competitive strength sports. I was decent at it, but when you put my name up against some of the other guests that you've had on the show, that pales in comparison. I actually think we can dive into this at some point, is that I think it actually has made me a better coach because it didn't come easy. Nothing came easy. And I'm not saying that it came easy to the world record holders that you've had on the show. It's just that, man, I just had to work for everything. My genetics sucked. I had to work for everything. And so I've struggled through all that stuff. And I think in that process, it's helped me become a better coach. And so I think I'm far more known as a strength coach at this point, and a CEO and founder of one of the larger online coaching businesses in the world than I ever was as a strength athlete. But yeah, I competed in powerlifting and strongman, won my pro card in strongman, and toured on the world's strongest man circuit from 06 to 09. Was never good enough to make the world's strongest man. I think the highest I got in the US was 12th as a pro. I love strength sports, man. I love strength. And I love sports growing up. I was very average. Again, my genetics were average. And so I played a lot of sports. I was always like the worst starter on the team. I would start, but I was like, I could even look and see there were a couple of people on the bench. I was like, those guys are better than me. But I worked hard. And so I think I was rewarded with starting playing time a lot of the times. Certainly wasn't good enough to play college ball in any capacity. Kind of basketball was my favorite sport at the time. And so I was fairly smart and went to school for academics. But I really discovered weightlifting and strength training my senior year of high school. So when I was 18, and went to a couple almost like NFL combine type events. They would call them like lineman camps. And so you would squat and you would bench press, and you would do like shot put, and you would do different like L cone drills or, agility drills, things like that. And I did really well at it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, there are way better athletes here than me. And but I just sort of fell in love with that, and fell in love mostly with the strength aspect. I think they tested us on squat and bench press that day. And so I loved it. And when I got out of high school and went to college and was doing that for academics, I needed a competitive outlet. And so I just continued to lift with really no, I didn't think I was ever going to compete at anything. I don't know that I even knew anything existed outside of bodybuilding. And I knew I wasn't going to do that. Right. And it's not to put bodybuilders down. It's just like, dude, I'm not going to put on a pink thong bikini and stand on stage and have a beauty pageant with other guys. That was not going to be what I did. And by the way, for people that do that, like, I have tremendous respect for the amount of work and dedication it takes to do that. But I was much more drawn to the strength aspect. I discovered Louis Simmons and Dave Tate, and Louis Simmons passed this past week, God rest his soul. And he was very instrumental in me becoming a strength athlete. I got to go out to Westside several times and train with Louis, Dave Tate, all those old articles in the early internet days, 97, 98, 99, when the internet was young. I printed them all out. I put them in a giant 3-ring binder, bands and chains, stuff like that. Like, the old original Jump Stretch guy that had the original bands. It was just all a new concept, and I was so excited to learn. And so I can remember going on vacation with my family, drive into Florida. We were too poor to fly anywhere, and drove down to Florida, down to Destin, and reading this giant 3-ring binder of all of the articles that Louis Simmons and Dave Tate wrote back in the late 90s, early 2000s, deepsquatter.com and what is now Tnation, what was back then known as testosterone.net, was they've softened the edges a little bit, but that was where it was. And I can remember reading an article called How to Bench Press 600 Pounds. And I remember thinking, like, I literally thought that maybe 2 or 3 people in the whole world had ever bench pressed 400 pounds. Yeah. Like, I really had no concept of what strength was or how strong people had been. And so that started my dive into strength training and powerlifting. And I was like, wait a minute, there's a sport where I can like eat pizza and drink beer and just like lift heavy. That sounds awesome. Let's do that. And so I went from 155 pounds my senior year of high school to about 250. So I put on about 100 pounds, almost 50 kilos, 45 kilos, somewhere in there, in body weight in about a year or year and a half. Like, it was pretty quick. I mean, I just hammered food and got strong, and it certainly wasn't all muscular weight, a lot, so it was fat. And I probably wouldn't do it all the same way now, but it was just a blast to get into that world. And so, I competed in powerlifting for several years. I competed in powerlifting all through the early 2000s. I think I did my first meet in 2000, got married in 2000. And by 2005, I wasn't really burnt out on powerlifting. It was more like, is there something else I can compete at that's also a little more interesting than just like 3 lifts, than just the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift? And by that time, by 2005, I think I had totaled elite in at least 3 weight classes and maybe 4. 220, 242, 275, and 308s at the time, and in pounds. And I was interested in strongman, but I didn't have any idea how to get into it. And so there was a professional strongman up in Kansas City, 3 hours away from me. I'm in the Midwest in Missouri, and called him up and said, hey, how do I get into this? And he said, just drive up one Saturday and train with me. So I drove up one Saturday and we did the log and the stones. And I can remember ending with the stones. It was, it was like an old barn. It was cold. It was wintertime. And you do these stones. And the only way to lift a stone is with a rounded back. Like, it's straight leg, round back, deadlift, with your hands underneath the stone on the ground. So it's not, typical barbells 9 inches off the ground or so. And so I can remember doing stones last, and they're so humbling when you do stones. And then I got in my truck and I drove home for 3 hours, and it was freezing cold outside, and my back got so stiff while I drove home that I remember when I got out of the truck, I almost fell in my driveway when I finally got home, because my back was just a wreck. And so, but I fell in love with that sport, and I competed in strongman in 2005, all through 2005, and did very well. It was, a matter of fact, it was the first sport I ever did that I was like, I think I'm good at this.
Yeah.
Kind of naturally. Like, I'm pretty strong. I've worked at being strong, and like, I'm pretty good. I remember competing against Brian Shaw, and Brian Shaw was like 275 pounds at the time. So, for those of you guys that know, I think he's 4-time or 5-time world's strongest man. And he weighs, he's weighed at the time when he was at the height of his career, he would weigh 440, 450 pounds. And I competed against him back when he was 275. So he was, just, he looked like a basketball player. He was tall and lanky. And actually we won our pro card at the same show in 2006. So I tell people that strongman's interesting, at least it was at the time that I was competing back then, is that we were going through a change in strongman, where strongman was moving from more athleticism to more ridiculous strength. So the Arnold Classic was growing. So you had the World's Strongest Man, which is always a little more, it's not quite as heavy. It's a little more athletic. Phil Pfister won that, was the first American to win that since Kazmaier did. And if you looked at him, he was strong, don't get me wrong, but it was more like he knew how to move. He moved fast. He was a fireman. It was just like, it was almost like the kind of workout you would see firemen do, firemen, police, military, PFT type stuff. The Arnold Classic was brutally heavy, and always has been brutally heavy. And I think among professional strongmen, that was the thing that people were like, man, if you win the Arnold Classic, like, you are legitimately probably the world's strongest man. And we got to a time where in those mid 2000s, it went from being like fairly athletic to like stupid heavy. I mean, stupid heavy, like just so heavy, like you're flipping 1,200 pound tires. And the yokes that you would run with would go from 800 pounds to 1,000 pounds to 1,100 pounds to 1,200 pounds. Like, you're running down the street with something between 1,000 pounds and 1,200 pounds on your shoulders. I mean, this is crazy. So, that kind of stuff really changed. And I had a very strong back, and I was a pretty good deadlifter. I could deadlift in the low to mid 700s at the time, and had won my lightweight pro card. So I was a 105K 231 lifter, and Brian Shaw won the heavyweights at the same show. But I pretty quickly saw that my body was not going to be able to keep up with this long term. Like, I'm not built, again, I wasn't like the big offensive lineman in high school. I was the basketball player. I weighed 155. I'm 6'1" and I was lanky. And so I put on all this weight, and I got myself up to around 300 pounds to get strong, and then backed it back down to try to, because I was like, I think I can do really well on the light heavyweight circuit for pro strongman. And I didn't. I went from being, one of the best amateurs in the country to the worst pro in the whole world. And that's really what it was. It's like when people talk about going from college football to NFL or something, it's just like the difference level in how strong these guys were and how well they performed was on another level. So, but man, it was great fun, and I loved doing that stuff. And I was in the best shape of my life. I had cut 50 or 60 pounds of body weight to make the light heavyweights to make 231. I certainly wasn't walking around at 231. I was 105K. I was walking around at 260, and would cut weight really hard, like a MMA fighter or something to make weight. And then we always had at least a 24-hour weigh-in and sometimes a 48-hour weigh-in. And so you could cut a bunch of weight and sit in a sauna, and not super healthy, but make weight. And then I would step on the stage at, 255, somewhere in there. So I'd put on an additional 10 or 15 kilos just in a 24-hour period. So that was really my competitive career. And it was a blast, and it's what kept me going. And I think my family, not my wife. My wife has always been extremely supportive, but my parents, and they were like, "What are you doing? Like, you're gonna die doing this." And then I can remember going to my first pro show, my first pro-am, actually, as Adrian Savickas was there, and just a bunch of the best of the best. Derek Poundstone, it was kind of his coming out party. And I can remember hearing my mom cheering for me in the crowd. And it was a massive crowd because you had all these big sort of thousands of that. And I can hear my mom cheering for me. The same mom who had never acknowledged that there was any value in this whatsoever. I could hear her voice. And that was a really special moment, to be able to go back and go like, man, my parents were proud of me. And, later my dad struggled with cancer. I just lost my dad a couple of weeks ago. And he'd been sick for a long time. And so it was actually, generally a joyous thing because he's not suffering anymore. But I can remember him being like in the hospital, and same thing. He had never told me anything about being proud of me for my strength or anything. And then when I would visit him at the hospital, all the nurses and, other patients that were there were like, "Oh, this is the strongman you're always telling me about." And I was like, whoa, Dad's talking to me about people in the hospital. And that was special too. So you realize like there was this sort of, I think, parental, they were cautious and they were nervous because like, man, you're going to break your back. You're going to do, but then they were really proud of the things that I had accomplished in the sport. And so, and that's really how we got our start into what eventually would become the growing business. So,
yeah. Cool. You can see the common theme through that of, loving what you were doing and, being able to look back on those memories with your dad and your mum, I think is things that you can look back on because, I always, how people got involved in strength sports and the other side of things, a little bit like myself, playing rugby and then stopping playing as much rugby and gravitating towards, wanting to do something relatively competitive. You kind of catch that bug, whether it is the powerlifting side of things or strongman or whatever it may be. Throughout that sort of the competing side of things, how did that then gravitate towards coaching? And for anyone listening who might not have seen the content that, Barbell Logic put out there or listen to your own podcast, Barbell Logic, how did it gravitate towards coaching and developing your own podcast and the sort of the business side of things away from your own competing?
Sure. That's a good question. Well, I had always geeked out on strength stuff. And so, or at least once I started getting into it. So again, late 90s, I was in college. I was getting my bachelor's degree at Missouri State University. They had a library. I can remember going down to the basement of the library, what I call the catacombs. I mean, places where people don't go. And they had all the old like Russian books and translated manuals and Soviet sports reviews books that I think Bud Charniga had translated in, Zatsiorsky's Science and Practice of Strength Training and Verkhoshansky and Mel Siff's Super Training and Tudor Bompa. And I remember like just I felt like I had found something that no one else knew about. Like I had discovered, I got lucky by becoming friends with Glenn Penlay, who's also now passed, with Louis, with Dave, with the West Side guys. But I also then felt like there was sort of a bridge. Louis had bridged Russian training style and some Bulgarian training style. He was kind of the bridge to take that into American powerlifting. And so then I dove even deeper than West Side and that stuff. And I started to dive into like, let's see what the Russians, what the Soviets were actually doing. I mean, it was Soviet Union before it fell. And so, when communism fell in the late 80s, early 90s, most of those Soviet coaches and doctors, PhDs, they came to the US and they started teaching in school here. A lot of them went to like Penn State, and so they had already written these books in Russian, and the books got translated into English. And so I started to geek out on that stuff, and it certainly affected my training, the way I train myself, but it also started to affect the way I thought about programming and coaching other people. And so I think that laid the original seed. A business partner of mine, a buddy of mine, I say a business partner, I mean, he was just a friend, and he was a great guy to this day. He's a good friend. Didn't know anything about business. I didn't either. We decided to open up a gym in 2008 and call it Strong Gym. And that was mostly so we could get our garages back, because we were starting young families and we're married and had little kids. And I can remember my wife being pregnant. It'd be icy and she couldn't park in the garage because the garage was a gym. And so we rented this, terrible space. It was a huge industrial place, like no heat, no air conditioning, windows broken. It had a bathroom, and just a play. And then we took all our equipment and we combined the equipment, like the stuff he had in his garage, the stuff I had in my garage. We already had a bunch of guys training together, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 guys, and started Strong Gym. No advertising, no marketing. It was not ever supposed to be, there were no delusions of grandeur that it was going to be a huge multi-million-dollar business. And people started coming, and I think it was because we had really good customer service.
Yeah.
And that even though the gym, like the building was crap and like it was gross, I say gross, the gym itself, we made impeccably clean. And so you would go to this like old warehouse, and I think you would think it would be gross inside, and there would just be like, but we cleaned the hell out of that gym, and we made it smell good, and we mopped it, and we wiped down all the equipment, and we made sure chalk wasn't all over the place. We had chalk, we had everything. And we could do all like the yoke runs and the tire flips and stuff. But the gym was massive, so you could do all that stuff inside. And it was like $500 a month for the rent. It was cheap. And we all just pooled our money together and did it. And then it started making some money. And we took all that money that it made and we put it right back in the gym, never took a dollar. I was a public school teacher at the time. I was completing my master's to be a high school principal. My business partner had been medically discharged from the Navy. He had really bad Crohn's. And so he had, some disability income that was coming in from that. And he was able to work at the gym during the day while I taught, and I would go to the gym both before and after school. And so that's kind of what started the business side of it. Man, I didn't know anything about business. I just liked to coach and liked to train with these other people. And then what happened is we started to see that everybody that trained at the gym that started as a power lifter or competitive strongman or even bodybuilders, we started getting more like business professionals and soccer moms coming. It's so weird because the sign on the door was an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that I had laminated and like taped to the door that said Strong Gym. That's what it was in 2008. And so it started to grow, and it grew and it grew. And we ended up moving out of that location to another location, and it grew. And I started to read everything I could about business and about systems and standard operating procedures and how to not become overwhelmed with what we were doing and how to act like an owner versus a manager versus a technician. And just started to absorb everything I could. I was very lucky. My younger brother, who's 3 years younger than me, he started, founded, and still co-owns, but is retired now from the day-to-day operations, one of the largest insurance software companies in the world. And again, we come from nothing, man. I'm a Baptist preacher's kid, like poor, never had new clothes, never had new shoes, only wore hand-me-downs. Never had it to this day. I've never had a Happy Meal from McDonald's. Because I remember Happy Meals were for rich kids. Like when I was little, it was like no. The once or twice a year we got to go to McDonald's. It was the all-American meal, no cheese. You can't have a Coke. You got to get a water because that's all we could afford. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. But my brother being able to do the business ahead of me also gave me a business mentor to kind of talk to about what it was like to hire staff and fire staff and shepherd staff and like how to run business. And so I started learning that stuff in 2008, 2009. I was able to leave teaching in 2012, at the end of 2012, and do the gym full time. And by 2013, it was the largest strength gym in the country. And we won powerlifting gym of the year 2 years in a row, over West Side, over Mark Bell Super Training, over. So the gym back to back years we had won powerlifting gym of the year, and it became just this like crazy. I mean, man, we had over 100 people that could deadlift over 500 pounds at the gym. Wow. But we had 18 guys that could deadlift over 700. 18. And one that could do 800. And so it was just a really competitive atmosphere, but it was a very focused on customer service.
Yeah.
The gym itself was called Strong Gym, and it was kind of blood red letters, and it felt like kind of scary. But once you walked into especially the final location that we bought and renovated, it was super nice, super clean, smelled great. And we were big on customer service. And so that gym had 3 separate big gym rooms under one roof.
Right.
And so one room was really for just like the general public, and it was still mostly barbells and racks. And there was a big 8-stack cable machine in there, but for the most part, it was still all free weights. And then we had another room that was for powerlifters and strongmen. And we had another room that was CrossFit. And we were able to meet the needs of all of those communities in our town, in our city. And it went really, really well. And so that's where I cut my teeth on business and learned a lot of stuff. You know, I look back and man, I made tons of mistakes as an owner and a boss. I thought I had a great relationship with all my employees. I find out later that, you know, I was an immature child, didn't know what I was doing either. And wasn't the boss that I could have been. And some of those relationships to this day are still are not fully repaired. And some of them have been repaired, and I'm thankful for it. But it was very much a learning process for me. And so at the end of 2015, I sold Strong Gym to a third partner that we had brought in a few years before. So me and the original guy, Will, ended up selling our gym, and it was not under great circumstances. It was just right. That partner, he came from a very wealthy family, and he wanted to move the gym in a slightly different direction, and we were kind of butting heads, and then they ended up sort of just buying us out. And so we did okay. You know, at the beginning, I remember it was very emotional. It was my baby. I had lost it. We were in a good financial position, but it was like, what am I going to do now? And so I went down to, my kids didn't have passports. And so I can remember it was wintertime, it was Christmas, December. And so we went all the way down to the southern tip of Texas, because that's as far as I could take my kids and as warm as it could possibly be while making an actual drive again. And we stayed down there for about a month in like an Airbnb. And I just sort of tried to figure out what was I going to do with my life, and had enough money that I could live for a while without, you know, so it's not like I had to figure it out tomorrow. But my plan was to open up an executive barbell club, like a very high-end barbell club, mostly for men, or maybe only for men, and charge, again, in Missouri, exorbitant rates, $600 a month, something like that. Leather chairs, nice equipment, whiskey bar, you know, that kind of stuff was what I was going to do. And I think we could have done well at that. But to back up just a little bit, just a couple months before I sold Strong Gym, Brett McKay of The Art of Manliness had me on his podcast. And that podcast was like a top 5 podcast at the time. It was millions of downloads a month. And I had started to coach Brett online. And when I did online coaching, which of course we're talking about way back. I've done some form of online coaching all through the 2000s, but one of the things that was very important to me is as soon as we had good enough broadband and good enough phones, I wanted to actually coach. I wanted to do technique breakdown. And it was the thing that I think separated what I was doing from most of the other online coaches, which were, they were selling templates, they were selling Excel spreadsheets. And that's not what I was doing. The programming for me and for us at the time was very, what we call simple, hard, and effective. It was very simple programming. You could figure out the programming in a hurry. But what you were paying for was the coaching eye, the technique. And so to get the technique breakdown within 24 hours and have really good service. And so I was doing that with Brett and just a handful of other people. And then Brett had me on his podcast to talk about how he received online coaching from me. And I had never coached him in person. And, he had hit all these PRs. And almost immediately I started to get a ton of people wanting to sign up for online coaching with me. And so in that process of going down to Texas, I called my little brother. I said, this is what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to open up this executive barbell club. And he asked me how online coaching was doing. And I said, well, it's doing really well. And it's, it's making this money and it was good. And he said, whoa, that's like, it was making, I was pushing like 6 figures. Yeah. And he goes, you're pushing 6 figures and you never marketed it. And I was like, well, I've never marketed it other than being on the Art of Manliness podcast, which I thought we were just going to talk training. And he said, I would see how the online coaching thing goes. Just put all your eggs in that basket for like 6 months. And if it doesn't work, you got enough money to live on from selling the gym to do that. And so, okay. So I started to think about how could we grow an online coaching business? How can we scale an online coaching business? That sort of thing. And I put systems in place and standard operating procedures in place. Also at the time I had come up through the Starting Strength organization and Mark Ripito, and was teaching all of the seminars that Starting Strength did at the time. And so we coached that style. And Starting Strength puts a big emphasis on quality of coaching and technique coaching, whether you agree with all of it or not. You can't disagree with the fact that they really, really harp on correct technique. And so we did that. Our relationship is since we've been in a lawsuit with Starting Strength since then, it has not gone well. So we are not in the same camp anymore. But that said, I'm still thankful that I was able to also continue to refine my coaching chops through Starting Strength, and then also kind of figure out the places that I agreed or disagreed a little bit on and sort of go that direction. But for me, it was more about connecting. I recognized that there were people all over the world who would love to get coaching from a professional coach, and they didn't have access to a professional coach. And there were professional coaches all over the world, especially ones in smaller towns. There were these incredible coaches that it didn't have enough access to people who needed their service. They didn't want to be doing body pump and whatever, so aerobics and they wanted to coach strength, and they wanted to be basically a private sector strength coach. And I recognized that there were some really, really good ones out there. And so we figured out how to scale the business, and I hired 30 coaches and then we did a big sort of grand relaunch in December of 16. And I think we had 100 people sign up on the first day. And I broke down, started crying because I was like, thank God it's going to work. I've hired 30 people. At least all my coaches have at least 3 or 4 clients on day one. And they did. And it has just grown since then. We were able to, it was really strange. We sort of did everything backwards, in the online coaching industry, and in just the internet industry, even outside of the fitness industry. People often grow a big following. They become influencers, right? They make content or they take pictures of their ass or their cleavage or their abs or whatever and post it on, and they build this big following. And then once they've got a big following, they sell their following something. They're like, buy this program from me, buy this, whatever. We were able to, just on our quality of coaching and quality of customer service, monetize online coaching really well. And then we started thinking to ourselves, like, man, I think we could do a really good podcast. I think we could do some really good YouTube videos. Then we did that. So it was actually in 2017, we started the Barbell Logic podcast. Scott Hambrick and I did. Scott's still a coach for me. He's not on the podcast anymore. But man, we had several years. It was just like, the podcast was so fun. And the things we talked about were, we just had a rapport that people don't tend to have on podcasts. And it's not me, man. It was Scott. I think Scott's one of the best podcasters of all time. I was the play-by-play guy and he was the color man. So I was talking most of the time, but he just was perfect in the way he did it. And so people listened and they loved it. And man, we started getting recognized in airports. It was so bizarre. I remember I had my airline pilot to Boston. As we're getting off the airplane, he stopped me and he was like, you're you're Barbell Logic. And I was like, what? Yeah. And my family was with me. Actually, my mother and father-in-law were with us on the plane too. And that was a really cool moment to get put, that the actual pilot on your plane was like, dude, I've listened to every podcast you've ever done. Like, it was incredible. And also we put out the podcast with not really a desire. It wasn't supposed to be a marketing arm of the online coaching. That's not what it was. It also wasn't like, we didn't really have any, like, I didn't think it was going to blow up and be a big podcast either. It was just, I had a bunch of stuff up here in my head from 20 years of coaching. And I wanted to walk through it in a systematic, logical progression of strength training. That's all it was. It was starting at, if you go back to those early episodes, it's like, why strength? What's the big deal about strength? How do I get strong? What lifts make me strong? I mean, it's very basic. And then it became more and more and more, intermediate, advanced, and then coaching focused, so on and so forth. And so the podcast blew up, man. It does 185,000 downloads a month, all through Libsyn right now. And then we also have a video podcast on YouTube. So we're pushing about 200,000 downloads a month, which for a very niche strength podcast is incredible. Now my co-host is Nikki Sims. So when Scott is a kind of a full-time farmer in Oklahoma now, and then does online coaching for me. And so he was just sort of getting out of the online space. Again, we still have a great relationship. Actually talked to him on the phone the other day. I'm buying a bunch of pasture chickens from him, and, but Nikki came on, and that changed the dynamics some, because now we have a male and a female on the podcast. And so it was that we were able to expand our female listenership and give that point of view as well. And Nikki and I have been very close for years. She was my first employee. She's my CXO, which is like customer experience, client experience, coach experience. She runs an incredible experience team. And so the podcast, it just blew up. It took off. A year or so after that, we started doing a YouTube channel and doing the same thing I wanted to do, just really highly produced, really well done videos that were short and succinct and just full of value. I hate watching YouTube videos where people there's a bunch of extra wasted space that are 28-minute long videos. Some people like that. Our long videos are like 6 or 7 minutes. And then we have a whole series of what we call gym shorts, which is basically how to do any of the lifts and in under 60 seconds. So we teach the snatch in under 60 seconds. We teach the clean, the squat, the deadlift, whatever. So including and body weight lifts too. So things like chin-ups or pull-ups or everything, LTEs, curls, we do accessory lifts. So that's gone very well as well. And we're not a content company, we're a service company. And I talk more about the online coaching piece of that, but we make our money from serving our clients online coaching. And so the content for us, because we're not a content company, is not there to drive revenue. It's there to build trust with people who will potentially be clients one day, as well as give great resources to our current clients and current coaches. And so we have a podcast topic on everything you'd ever want to know. We've got a video on just about everything you'd ever want to know. We've got incredible written content. My editor-in-chief is an attorney. He's not a practicing attorney, but he's a licensed attorney. He is incredibly eloquent. We have hundreds of articles on the website on barbellogic.com, free ebooks. Again, all the content's free. We put all that stuff out. And so, that's how we got into the online coaching. I'll stop because I haven't let you get a question in, but I can talk a little bit more about where we are today as well, because I think we've matured even further down the line. But that's kind of how the transition came from how I went from a lifter to how I got into business with Strong Gym, to how I transitioned that into online coaching, and then sort of this weird exponential growth that occurred in the online coaching in both our business and in the podcast and YouTube channel.
No, that was really, really insightful. Obviously, having a bit of a background from there, and I really liked the explanation of how opening a gym came about. And just wanting to make sure that your garages was free, because right. When especially speaking with a lot of coaches that I know that either work or manage in gyms, then it's kind of like there's always that thought process of I need to open my own gym, whereas actually having that background there of, well, actually it came about because I needed my garage, and then it's a case of, well, actually I learned as I went, as opposed to this, a lot of people who might be listening to this podcast for the first time or hearing about Barbell Logic for the first time, especially over in the UK, might be a case of, oh, well, it just came about as this entire product that was there. No. Whereas actually the amount of work that has gone into it, and, the common theme throughout when you were talking about your about competing was you enjoyed it. The common theme about the business side of things was always the service, serving the clients, which ultimately, you do that as a coach, but you also have to do that from a business point of view, because, I feel as though that's where you get the buy-in from people, and you get that trust. And I know we spoke, we spoke before when we were setting up this podcast in terms of, turnover and that sort of stuff, which we'll 100% touch on as we move on through the chat. I kind of wanted to go back to when you were talking about the coaching and the competing side of things, in terms of yourself, starting out and reading and experiencing and developing from, putting on weight within that first year to then becoming, pro strongman and, elite powerlifter. How was that sort of crossed over into how you coach, in terms of, a lot of people get involved in strength sports, strongman, powerlifting, weightlifting, whatever it may be. And I know from listening to your podcast and the content putting out there in terms of experiencing strength, and I kind of just wanted to touch on, what does that actually mean? How does that start when you're actually working with clients to then see them progress through strength, rather than it being a case of, here's a 12-week program that'll get you strong, as opposed to, let's look at these next 20 years of lifting and see what your journey is gonna look like.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you. That's a great question and a great setup. I think for us, man, when we talk about experiencing strength, which is one of our big taglines, our goal in helping people experience strength is to improve their quality of life, period. Like, that's the point. And so everybody's journey is going to look different. The world champion powerlifters are going to experience strength, and they're going to do everything they can to put every pound on the bar to hit massive PRs. But most of our clients just want to get generally strong to improve their quality of life, to like do life better, to keep up with their kids or their grandkids better, to be able to improve health metrics, to like whatever that thing is. And so I think one big thing about being a coach, first off, I experienced this in my life when I got strong. Like, I didn't just have these physical changes. I recognized that the pursuit of voluntary hardship, of doing this thing that was hard that nobody else made me do. And this is why most people don't squat. That's why guys go to the gym and they bench press and curl, right? Because bench presses and curls aren't that hard. Squats are hard. You put a bar on your back, nobody's going to make you squat. You put a bar on your back, you squat all the way down, all the way back. I mean, it's hard. And I don't think strength training or barbell training is the most important thing in the world at all. I have relationships in my life that are far more important than strength training. But what I have found is that strength training, when done for the right reasons, doesn't just refine us physically, but it refines us mentally and emotionally and socially and relationally and spiritually, if you're wired that way. And so, again, I don't think it's the best thing in the world. I don't think it's the most important thing in the world, but I do think it generally works for everybody on earth. I mean, they're literally almost every single person on the planet can do this thing. And so I've told stories in the past. I've got one of my favorite clients. Her name is Miss Sybil. She's 87 years old. I've been coaching her for 7 or 8 years. She's got double hip replacement, knee replacement, or most of her backs fused together. She had an 1.5 inch cut off one of her Achilles. All that stuff occurred before she met me. So she was a mess. And I started to coach her. And did I put her on the machines? Nope. I taught her how to stand up out of her kitchen chair. That's a squat.
Yeah.
And I taught her how to stand up out of a kitchen chair 3 times. And then I came back to the house and we did it for sets of 5. And then we did it for sets of 7. And then I handed her a 5-pound weight to hold. And that's linear progression. That's just a linear progression. It's just like most people don't think of sitting in a kitchen chair and standing back up as linear progression, but it is. And so I watched her life completely change. The quality of her life completely change. because of the physical strength, because she was able to experience strength. So yes, that experience is a physical thing, but it is bizarre how it affects our lives in every, in every sort of medium or every sort of space in our brains and our lives and our man, it touches every piece. And so for us, first off at Barbell Logic, it's about listening to the client and trying to understand or try to peel the onion skins away till we get the onion layers away till we get to the center, to go like, okay, what is the thing that will actually improve your quality of life? And then we're going to pursue that, right? And then from there, it's about providing world-class service to everybody through personal, professional coaching. We don't believe in templates. Like, yeah, no, I know they exist, right? So I know templates exist, so I believe in like we don't use templates.
Yeah.
Not because I don't even think that even think templates work sometimes. They just don't work optimally, right? Minimum effective dose programming works optimally. Everybody starts with linear progression. There's no reason to start in any. So linear progression, I'm sure your listeners know this, but it literally is just adding a little bit of weight every single workout, or it's adding a little bit of volume every single workout. It's whatever variable you choose. But if you can come in and add 5 pounds to your squat or your bench press or your press or your deadlift or whatever it is, every time you do that movement for like 6 months, why would you do anything else? Anything more complicated it's going to be less effective, right? And even if it's equally as effective, you don't really know what worked because it's so complicated. Let's start as simple as we possibly can. And then one day we can't add 5 pounds to the bar anymore, or we would all squat 1,000 pounds. And you have to start making changes, but you just make the minimum effective dose change. If I have a headache and 1 or 2 ibuprofen will kill the headache, I don't need to take 8. That's the concept of minimum effective dose is a medical term. Like, why would you don't overdo the thing, right? Now, it's not just minimum effective dose because it's minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment. So for I definitely believe in the use of fractional plates. I think especially for females who are pressing, you can't just put 2.5s or 1 kilo plates for you guys over there. Like, that's a big jump for a lady to add, to add 2 kilos per workout, or for Americans to add 5 pounds per workout. So you need some of those fractional plates, and we love those. But I wouldn't take somebody like you and add a 1/2 pound or a 1/4 kilo to your squat workout. Like, that's not minimum effective dose, because I don't think it's going to maximize your return on investment. So it's figuring out the balance between minimum effective dose and maximum return on investment. But we just change one variable at a time is what we do. And occasionally you have to change 2 because intensity and volume have an inverse relationship with each other, right? So as the weight on the bar goes up, the volume has to come down. You can't do 95% of your 1 rep max for 3 sets of 10. That would kill you. And so sometimes it's just that. And when you start playing that inverse relationship of intensity and volume, then maybe the driving metric that we're looking at is tonnage. Does the tonnage keep going up, right? So we do this for improving quality of life. We make sure everybody gets personalized professional coaching and a wow level of customer service. Like, people are frequently wowed by the customer service. Programming is always simple, hard, effective. Minimum effective dose changes, right? And then you get this other big advantage that we don't talk about enough, which is the flexibility for both the coach and the client to train when they want, where they want, anytime they want, with the equipment that they have. So like, I could coach you. You're in Leeds. I'm in Missouri. I can coach you. You can lift anytime you want. You film your lift. You upload it to our software. We own our own software. I break it down within 24 hours, but I can do that whenever I want. So you and I don't have to connect at the same hour.
Yeah.
We've got clients in Singapore. We have clients that literally are on the complete, like, when it's daytime there, it's bedtime here, and vice versa. And that is really cool to be able to do that. And then, making sure we're meeting our clients where they're at. We're not trying to get everybody to be a professional powerlifter. As a matter of fact, most of our clients, the vast majority of our clients, are not competitive. They're middle-aged men and women. They're 35 to 55, and they're just trying to get strong via the barbell lifts, good technique, consistency, to improve their quality of life. And so because we've done that, we've done it well, our churn is incredibly low, man. Our churn, and for people that don't know what that word means necessarily, it's like, what percentage of your clients on an auto recurring basis, so when you auto pay your gym membership every month, or you auto pay your cell phone bill every month, or whatever, what percentage of your clients do you lose every month? Well, standard for internet businesses is about 10%, and that's like danger zone. 10% means every 10 months I have to literally replace 100% of my clients. 5% is really good for an internet business, especially for what's called a B2C business, where businesses are interacting with the end user client. They're not B2B, they're not business to business enterprise software. Our churn is like 1.8%. Like, it's unheard of low. Nobody leaves because it works really well, because the service is really good, and because we spend a ton of time making sure that clients are paired with the right coach, and then the coach spends a ton of time to make sure that they develop a right relationship with their client. And so our compliance at 90 days, our 90-day compliance for every single exercise of every single set and rep assigned, is somewhere between 87 and 89% compliance. Now, I mean, so I'm not talking about 87, 89% of the workouts are completed. I mean, even those little accessory workouts, which are like, I don't want to do rolling dumbbell extensions today, or they just did 2 sets instead of 3 sets. I'm talking about high 80s, almost 90% total compliance across all lifts, all set and rep schemes. That's a huge deal too. And again, that also allows us to collect data that gives us red flags of a client. Like, we know if a client's getting ready to cancel often before they know that they're getting ready to cancel, because we can watch the compliance go down.
Yeah.
And it gives us the red flag. And so, where we are today is, those are the things that I think sets Barbell Logic online coaching apart. Where we are today is last year, over the last several years, we've been developing our own software. We're using third-party programming software, a good one. And there are several out there. We were their biggest client, but we were still probably a very low percentage of their total revenue. So we were paying quite a bit a month for the software use, but it was probably less than 1% of their revenue. So I couldn't really get the software company to change the things I needed. And the primary thing that we needed that we didn't get was, we wanted automated metric tracking. PRs matter, man.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about 1 rep maxes. I mean everything. 1 rep, 3 rep, 5 rep, 3x5, 5x3, 4x4, PRs on every lift, not just the squat, deadlift, bench press, and press, but I mean every variation of those things: rack pulls, deficit deadlifts, press lockouts, like every single exercise, accessory exercises. Our software auto tracks metrics, tonnage, volume, intensity, everything. Everything is automated, and it tracks it, and it then sends both the client and the coach a congratulatory message every time they hit a PR. So, because a lot of times you don't even know, like you'll be doing something you'll be doing barbell curls, and you'll hit a barbell curl, and it'll be like, congratulations, that's a PR. You're like, holy shit, I didn't know. Awesome. I just hit a PR right there. And so the software has been able to do that. And we spend a ton of time on that software to make sure that's where 99% of the interaction between the client and the coach come from. And so, we do screen recordings as coaches to break down videos of our clients. So we don't really utilize typed feedback. So I don't watch your squat and then type what you should do. I do a screen recording, and you see what I'm seeing. I'm watching you squat, and I'm talking like on this podcast setup, and I'm saying, okay, here's what I'm seeing on your squat. Stop, pause it. I can draw on the screen, see your knees are forward a little bit. You're on your toes. You got to get back on the foot, like whatever that thing is. And so that but it also sort of creates, in the early days, by the way, we did use typed feedback. But now that we do screen recording, it's sort of like I'm having a conversation. It feels to me like I'm having a conversation with my client every day. And so I'm like, hey man, how's it going? I know about their wives and their kids, and when they go on vacation, and how was Las Vegas, and let's get back slowly. Did you drink too much? Like, you can ask them those things. And so, because you've got a right relationship, and so they know that you're personal, and you are actually investing in their lifting, that you care as much about their lifting as they do. And you're probably the only person that does, right? And I think those are the things that have set Barbell Logic apart as an online coaching business. And so, we're a staff, I think, of about 80 now. We've got way over 1,000 clients. Definitely one of the larger online coaching businesses in the world, and just loving what's going on. And for us, the next step has really been to figure out, how do we give that system to the rest of the world? And so I think the next step for us is we have a product that will be coming out called Turnkey Coach. The website will be turnkey.coach, no .com, which is cool. You can actually buy. So it'll be turnkey.coach. And it will be our system of online coaching, our administrative backend work, our software, payment processing. We handle bounce credit cards, customer support, coach support, all this stuff that makes us a very profitable company. By the way, our coaches that work for us, man, the ones that work for us for a little while, they're making about $150 an hour doing online coaching. No commute, no put on the purple polo. You can do online coaching I've done it many times, from the beach in Mexico, from your living room, drinking coffee, out on your deck at night, having a glass of wine, making $150 an hour. That's mind boggling. And by the way, that's not like I'm gonna be clear, that's not an exaggeration, sort of like, oh, only one or two of my coaches make that. Like, when you are slow and inefficient as a new coach on our system, you're still going to make $50 an hour. And then as you get more efficient at the process, it's not that we pay people more or less. Like, you get paid, the standard rate for every client that you have. It's that as you get more efficient and you learn how to use the technology better, you get better and better and more efficient and more clean. And you actually provide better coaching in a more efficient amount of time. And you're like, wow, I'm literally made $150. So, people, we've got coaches, you can make 60, 70, 80, $100,000 a year extra for very part-time work. Yeah. And, on one level, I am definitely trying to end the personal training industry. I want to disrupt it. I think personal training is completely and utterly broken. I'm not trying to end the professional coaching industry.
Yeah.
Professional coaches who are good strength coaches at good gyms that do that in person, that's great. We want to support them. Guy like you can do what you do, go coach. You're never going to make as much money at your gym as you could do online coaching, but you love it. You do what you enjoy. And then you can also do online coaching on the side with a system that we can provide through Turnkey Coach, and add an extra 30, 40, 50 grand or more for like an hour a day of work, which is pretty awesome. So I think that's why it's worked well. And what we're trying to do is, in the past, you had to do that through the Barbell Logic brand. And we've got certain ways we think about programming and coaching and how we perform the lifts. And we know there are people out there that won't necessarily want to, there are great coaches, there are professional coaches already who, but who won't want to coach under the Barbell Logic brand because they don't 100% align with the way we program or the way we teach the squat or whatever. And that doesn't matter at all, because we're all working towards the same goal. And so they will have an opportunity to coach under their own brand, right? Matt Reynolds online coaching, or whatever your brand is. Like, we'll be able to customize the software for you so that it's your software. It looks like your software, but like, we get to do all the back end work, and you just get to do what you do best, which is coach. You coach, and we teach you the system, and then we do all the stuff on the back end. Like, that's a pretty sweet gig for everybody. We get to make a little money on the back end because we figured out how to do the back end work well over the past 6 years. This is not like a new startup company and we don't know where the pitfalls are going to be. But and then we walk our coaches through how to do online coaching in a way that is very successful and efficient. And so, yeah, I'm excited. The online coaching's gone well. The future product of the Turnkey Coach. And then the last thing, again, I don't want to make this like a commercial, is that we started to look at the life cycle of a client, where clients start obviously almost always like as novices or beginners, and then they become intermediates, and the programming gets a little more complicated. And then if they're really in and they really get bit by the bug, they become like super barbell enthusiasts. Like it's the version of what I was in the late 90s of going down to the library and like wanting to read everything you could. And they start coaching their wives or their spouses or their kids or their parents or their neighbors or people they go to church with or whatever. Like that, and they're not charging those people. They're just coaching because they've fallen in love with this thing. And so a few years ago, we launched a Barbell Academy, and it has just gone gangbusters. It's an online learning environment that you can do. It's $89 a month for 12 months. And you can also, there's a cash up front payment that's cheap. You can get a discount if you want to, but it's pretty cheap. So, I mean, I'll tell you this, by the way, it doesn't take 12 months to get through it. It's just, we try to make it an affordable monthly charge. And that's all you ever get. That's all you ever have to pay is $89 a month. And you go through principles, and principles is great for both the barbell enthusiast and as a prerequisite for coaches. We have an advanced section of courses as well on things like anatomy and kinesiology and advanced programming and that kind of stuff. Deep dives on energy systems, working on adding things like nutrition, injury prevention and rehab, stuff like that. And once you're part of that academy, you will get access to all the new stuff that comes out for free for the rest of your life. Like you paid for it. You're in, right? You're in the community. And you have the opportunity then to earn your professional barbell coaching certificate through the academy and through us. And if you do earn the PBC, you are going to have a shot to coach at Barbell Logic online coaching. But you could also at some point just decide, I would rather do this on my own. And now I could use Turnkey Coach to help build an online coaching business. And so we've tried to create a really smooth system, reduce all the friction. All of our online coaching products, man, your first month is 100% free and there's no contract. And everybody's like, what's the catch? It's no catch. It's good. Like the coaching's good. So you can try our coaching out with literally no skin in the game. With literally no risk. Try for 28 days, 29 days, 30 days. If you're like, it's just not for me, you can cancel. Almost nobody ever does that. They stay because it's worth it. So man, anyway, it's starting to sound like a commercial. That's not what I want it to be. It's just, we've tried to think through, and the reason it sounds that way is I know you've got a lot of people listening to your podcast who are lifters and barbell enthusiasts. And for them, I definitely don't want this to sound like a commercial. The CTA, I would give those, the call to action I would give those people would be like, hey, just check out our content. Look at YouTube, listen to our podcast. It's 100% free. We don't hit you up and ask you for money on stuff. As a coach, or for people who want to be a coach, I just want to make sure that people know that there's a really good pathway out there to become a coach, to learn what you need to know through the academy, to earn your PBC, to earn your professional barbell coaches certificate. And then there's a product coming for coaches to be able to utilize if they want to, like, hey, I don't know, either you've never done online coaching, or you've done it and it hasn't gone very well, or you've lost clients, or you've got high turnover rate, or you can't figure out how to make it worth your money, or you just don't even know where to start. That's what Turnkey Coach is for. And so all of those are available to the fitness industry. And it's, again, for us, I think we're all trying to work on the same team, right? We're all trying to get people to improve their quality of life by experiencing strength. And exactly how we go about doing those things will be different. How we, what exercises we utilize, or exactly how we program, that's going to be different. But I think ultimately, philosophically, we all can be on the same page. We make enemies of no one, because we recognize that while there are people that we would not fully agree with the way they do the hows, I think most of us agree on the whys. The why is absolutely. Like, this makes people's lives better.
Absolutely. And, I liked what you mentioned there in terms of everyone's heading still towards the same goal, because, if coaches learn from other coaches and can develop systems, that's only going to improve, which has been, a common theme that we've chatted about, the service that we're giving clients, because,
that's right.
I suppose I can imagine, I know I've got, or I've heard a few, I know you might have heard a few as well, or people who are listening who are clients or coaches, horror stories of poor programming or poor coaching in terms of technique. And there's quite a lot of things there that you mentioned that had a knock-on effect from or can have a knock-on effect on each other. So there's kind of two questions off the back of that in terms of probably from probably more from a coaching side of view point of view, to be honest, in terms of, you mentioned as clients gravitate towards beginner to intermediate and develop through, and kind of, you know, the data points that you've mentioned that you can track. Are there certain standards that coaches want to be looking for? Because one of the other things that you mentioned was obviously meet the client where they're at and be like, right, yep, look, how can we progress them through from there? And then in terms of that was the first part. The second part was sort of, where do you think sometimes coaches struggle with in terms of the quality of service that they're offering and trying to stick with those templates, as opposed to, I think, across the board, because especially over COVID, I know online coaching has been around for a while.
Yep.
Online coaching kind of blew up and anyone could be an online coach. Whereas I always think there's got to be a certain level of professionalism or a certain certain standard of coaching, yep, which, you know, it doesn't have to be a case of, yes, you know, you kind of cut your teeth coaching in person to then be able to offer online coaching, as opposed to just saying, well, I'm an online coach now, so here's a program. So yeah, they're kind of the two follow-up questions from there. Both kind of makes sense.
Those are great. On the metric side, or what the standard is for like the what we're pursuing, it really comes down to the client. Like, what are the client's goals? So what I don't necessarily want to do is pursue like, hey, our goal is to get everybody a double body weight squat and triple body weight deadlift, or because like a lot of our clients don't care. The goal is progress. The goal is to make progress. Now, we definitely identify some of those North Star metrics to say, like, these are the things that we're going to try to pursue that are the things that if they make progress, it will actually make their life better. So for some people, that might be like a waist measurement. It might be like, listen, my waist is 50 inches and I got to get it down below 40. And like, okay, well, we can't go from 50 to 40 overnight, but like the short-term goal is let's get it to 48, you know, so, and that becomes one of the metrics. But for other people, a waist metric isn't going to matter at all. For some people, like the strength metrics or hitting 100 maxes are going to be that. We partner a lot with the United States Strength Lifting Federation, USSF, to do online meets with our clients all the time. So we want them to compete as often as possible, because it just sort of like raises the standard of their coaching, or raises the standard of their training. But the key there is really to figure out, to hear what they're telling you as a coach. What are the things that matter to them? I think if somebody hires you as a coach and their goal is to lose body weight, and look better and feel better, and all you do is pursue strength metrics, you missed the boat. You didn't listen to them. Strength metrics matter, and they're super fun, getting strong almost for everybody. But if somebody needs to lose 20 or 30 or 40 pounds of body weight, or lose excess waist measurement, or improve their blood lipid profile, and all you do is double their squat and double their deadlift, and then they're no healthier for it and they've lost no weight, then you didn't accomplish the goal. And so I think that's number one. And then on the other side of like, we have a tough standard for coaching at Barbell Logic. I think what you see with a lot of coaches where coaches struggle is, in the beginning, anybody can make progress. It really doesn't even matter what you do. I mean, like terrible. I mean, like, you see this, right? So we have a famous program in the US called Bigger, Faster, Stronger. I don't know if you guys have the same sort of thing over there. A lot of football kids use it, and it's crap as a program. Sorry. But you know what? All those 16 and 17-year-old boys get real strong on it.
Yeah.
Because they're beginners and they're in puberty and they're like walking bottles of testosterone, and they get strong. The problem with coaches is what happens when they can't get people stronger anymore. Like, man, it's hard. Like, you coach somebody for a year or 2 years or 3 years, like making progress becomes very difficult. And I think that's really what separates the best coaches from the good coaches. The best coaches can figure out how to keep making progress, or to talk through the client about what the goals are to continue to get there. I was having a conversation about this with my mission control team just in the last couple of days. Some well-known coaches that I have respected for years online as strength coaches who I've respected as strength coaches are starting to kind of not promote strength. And we're like, that's weird that they would, like, they're getting away from strength. Why would they do that? And I think our theory is that you start getting to a point where you're like, you don't know how to get people stronger anymore.
Yeah.
And once you don't know how to get people stronger anymore, you're like, maybe I should change what the metric. Maybe I should get people to go do like Spartan runs or something, which I don't think there's anything wrong with. It's just, so I think that's where the struggle is, man. And that's what good coaches are, lifelong learners. You've got to constantly read and learn. We've got a great community of incredible coaches at Barbell Logic. We're constantly asking each other questions. I'm struggling with this. I've had this client for 2 years. They were crushing it. And now I'm just like hit a wall. They've plateaued. And to be able to have that sort of community at Barbell Logic, or, you know, in the future, Turnkey Coach, I think that's huge. I think being able to, and I think we get too competitive as coaches where we're like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share our secrets. And like, how are you going to learn? And so I'm so thankful that in the late 90s, when I went to the Glenn Penleys and the Louis Simmons and the Dave Tates, you know, and the Mark Ripitos, that they taught me everything they knew and weren't worried about the competitive aspect of, oh, he's going to take my idea and go like turn into a competitor. They just was like, dude, we got to get people strong. And here's what we do when it stops making progress. And I think that's how the minimum effective dose programming was born. By the way, if you're somebody that's been pretty deep in strength training before, you know a fair amount about this stuff. A great place to start if you want to get a taste of our podcast is season 6. You can go back and it'll be back a couple years ago. I taught a minimum effective dose programming class. It was 8 weeks. The class was like 2 hours per week. And what we did is we had our producer cut every one of the podcasts down to like an hour or less. So a really tight version of the class. And I think that's some of the best work we've ever done. And so if you want to learn about minimum effective dose programming, I believe that's season 6 for Barbell Logic podcast. Again, doesn't cost anything. It's free. Just go listen to it and learn how to program. And that walks you through what happens every time you hit the plateau for about 12 or 13 or 15 plateaus. Okay. Well, like when I hit the first plateau, I kind of know the next step to make. And then they hit the plateau again. I know the next one, but you get to about 7 times in and you're like, I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
So I
think that was a really good point when you mentioned there in terms of the other coaches that you've learned off, and you know what happens how do we keep getting people stronger? Whereas throughout this entire chat, you've mentioned about the emphasis on the word free resources that people can learn from. But then I always kind of think, and be interested to hear your opinion in terms of, yeah, but what are they hiding? What's actually the secret formula that might be behind it? Whereas actually it's a case of, well, no, actually, these are the things that we can do and learn from and progress from there. And do you think that's where sort of rather than coaches stepping away and trying to change the metric that they're tracking, trying to develop with the client that they're working with and trying to look from other coaches and see what they can learn and adapt from there? What do you think maybe holds coaches back from continuing that development?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I wish I fully knew. I mean, I think some of it is just, I think it's a combination of that competitive issue that we said, like they are worried that if they have to go to other coaches, then they might lose their clients to those coaches. I think that coaches are rife with imposter syndrome. Dude, there are so many coaches out there that are like, pretend that they know everything. They know they don't really, and they feel like imposters. Hey, I've been doing this for 25 years. I do not know everything. I love to learn from people. So I get it. And by the way, I've experienced the same thing as a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I have imposter syndrome there sometimes. I'm like, man, I see what some of these CEOs of like huge companies, and I'm like, man, they're beyond what and so I'm studying and doing everything I can to learn that world. And so I think that it's important to just keep learning. There's another part of this though, where the minimum effective dose, this is why I think that style of programming where we're changing one variable at a time, if you change a variable and the client doesn't get better, doesn't make progress in 2, 3, 4 weeks, that was the wrong variable and you can change. But if you change them from one template to another template and the program's completely different and it doesn't work, you're like, I don't know why it's not working now because I just changed 4 different variables at once. Likewise, even if it does work, you don't know why it worked. So when you go from one template to the next template, even if it goes really well, what are you going to do going from template number 2 to template number 3 if you don't know why template number 2 worked well? So that's what I love about, man, it's just the scientific method. That's all it is, right? You just like, you develop a hypothesis, you have the theory, you test the thing, you test one variable, you see what kind of change it makes, you can compare it to the control. And then like, if it works, great, we keep pushing on it. And if it doesn't, we can change it quicker. And so as a coach, you find out where your mistakes are faster than you did if you did a long template. So sorry, my laptop is about to die, so we're charging it. I'm gonna plug it in real quick.
No worries. I think what you've mentioned there is a really good, and I think what people are always overlooking, the fact that changing one variable, if that worked or didn't work. Whereas if we change everything, how do you know? And I think that can apply as well. A little bit similar to sorry, you're plugging your laptop.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. I'm listening.
It's a little bit similar to when people are the example that you mentioned with the written feedback in an email as opposed to the actual sending a video back. Change that. How does it improve your service? Well, actually, we can now build more rapport with our clients, which is really important, which is sometimes very hard to do, over online coaching. We change that variable, what happens? And I think that's where, sometimes that imposter syndrome, it might take a little bit longer time, because I do feel as though with the society that we live in, everything needs to be rushed. Everything needs to be, well, we want it now, as opposed to, right, we're going to change this one thing. Did that improve the client's strength or whatever it may be? Equally from a business point of view. And I think that's where I find sometimes coaches can sometimes see the waters get muddied a little bit, because those same principles can be applied. Would you agree? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, that's the way. That's if you knew how often I utilize this in my own life, in my own programming, but also just like in how we do the business, dude, and even how like my relationship with my wife, my kids. Again, it's not that I'm a robot and think only systematically and logically about everything, but when you approach, as a matter of fact, I'm a fairly emotive guy. Like I'm known to be easy to get choked up. I'll get choked up, and and it's not. I typically get choked up with tears of joy, not sadness. It's not. Yeah. So it's usually the other one around. But I don't really let my emotions drive my actions. Actions are driven by logical thinking. So I sit down and just think about like, okay, what's the best approach for this that's logical and systematic and minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment? And, again, I wouldn't call it my life's philosophy, but I think it's something that matters and works well in really most facets of your life. And so that's the same. I didn't even get into, but that's exactly the same way we approach nutrition too, right? Yeah. So we do nutrition coaching. You can throw everything, every card that you have to play at your clients on nutrition and like, okay, here's the 12 new things that you're going to do starting Monday in the new diet. And even the ones that are like very type A and organized and are able to do it, they'll make tons of progress in the first month. And then they're going to hit a plateau. And then what are you going to do? You don't have any more cards to play. Yeah. So instead, what we do is we have our clients do a visual food diary. They take pictures of everything they eat for like 4 days. And then we do what we call the triage method, which is like, okay, what's the number one habit that we need to change? Okay, this person's having 4 alcoholic drinks a night, every night. Well, we're probably not going to cut them to 0 overnight. We're going to cut them from 4 to 2. We're going to cut it in half and let their body adjust. And then we're going to go from 2 to 1. And then if they're like, I really love having a drink at night, like, we're not going to cut the drink out. Like, let's let them have 1 drink. We go to the next habit, right? And so before you start to do like, oh, you're going to go this, you're going to intermittent fast, and you're going to do macros, and we're going to eat high protein and low fat and moderate carb, or we're going to carb cycle, and you're going to do cardio for fat burning. You're also going to take fat burners. I mean, that's so many things. Like, I always want a card to play. And it's really the same with coaching because, I remember, who Joe DeFranco is? Or
Yeah.
have you ever talked to? Okay. So back in the old days, Joe, I was always a big fan of Joe DeFranco. He really made his name getting people ready for the NFL Combine. And I've thought a lot about this. He had to get the most out of his clients in the least amount of time. So he would get these college kids who were coming out of their senior year of college or the junior year of college, getting ready to go to the NFL Combine. And he'd have like 12 weeks with them to prep them for the NFL Combine. That's it. It's 12 weeks. And then they're gone. They're in the NFL. Well, that's not who we coach. We don't coach for 12 weeks. So the way I would approach a client where I'm like, listen, I need to get the maximum out of them in 12 weeks. That would be the one time I think I would say like minimum effective dose programming probably isn't right. That's probably not the right approach. But for 99.9% of us, our goal is to keep clients forever, 10 years, 20 years, the rest of their life. And so we don't have to be in a hurry to get somebody to a 36-inch vertical jump or to a 500-pound squat. We just need to keep making progress. And if we keep making progress, it doesn't even have to be slow progress. Remember, again, it's maximum return on investment, but it's a minimum effective dose changes. We just change one thing at a time and let them make progress. Then what that does, I think, both from a strength training standpoint and a nutrition standpoint, is it makes the changes far more sustainable. They last. If you throw everything in the kitchen sink at somebody, they might be able to do it for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or even 8 weeks, but they're not going to be able to do it forever. Listen, I still do this, man. When I get ready to go on a vacation to Mexico or something, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to the beach in 8 weeks. I'm going to diet hard. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to go tan. I'm going to look good. But that's not sustainable. I don't do that year round. So what we're trying to do is help people create a right relationship with food, a right relationship with strength training, so that they actually change the habits and it becomes part of who they are, it becomes very sustainable, and they improve their quality of life. That's the point. That's the philosophical difference, I think, between us and most other coaches. Now, I think when I say that, most other coaches are like, yeah, I want that too. And then, yes, that's what I'm for, which is great because I want more and more coaches that think that direction. But I think in general, that's not communicated very well. And I think it's mostly not communicated very well because it's sexy to either have complicated programs or it's sexy to coach competitive athletes. The more competitive powerlifters and strongmen and big influencers you coach, the more celebrity you earn and respect you earn in that world. And like, dude, I don't care anything about that stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have some really good lifters at Barbell Logic. We do. And I coach some really strong ones.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a cult of personality. This isn't about Matt Reynolds or about any of our other coaches. This is about learning how to coach people to improve their quality of life, which means pairing them with the right coach. There's tons of people that I shouldn't be coaching. And so for me, that's why we don't pursue 23-year-old powerlifters. Yeah. Even though we have some of those, we pursue people who are just trying to get stronger and improve their quality of life. Yeah. And develop sustainable habit changes. And so, yeah, I think there's a pretty big philosophical shift there. By the way, I think it's a better business model for us, because, just lack of a better 23-year-old powerlifters are broke.
Yeah. I think that's
where 45-year-old, like middle-aged people aren't, and they are set in their life. They're not going to get bored and go do hot yoga or CrossFit after 3 months. So sorry, go ahead.
I think I was just going to say there, I think that's a really good point. A couple of times you've mentioned about, what is it experiencing strength, and it is improving the quality of life. And I think, especially with powerlifting, I know obviously strongman is getting a lot popular, but just using powerlifting as an example, since it's become raw, the entry point for powerlifting is so low. It's kind of anyone,
much lower.
Like
That's
what you
great.
Anyone can jump in there. Yep. So there is an influx of, I train quite a lot of masters lifters who haven't done that much training before, but want to get involved because it's a new entry point. It's cool. And it's kind of, they're a little bit more willing to learn. Whereas, as a kid, I played a variety of sports before settling on rugby, and then gravitated towards towards lifting. I think now, because the entry point is low, we're getting, people involved in strength sports who may be, like what we've touched on before, trying to rush too much, trying to get their maximal strength at a really young age, but then and they're not progressing because they're injured or anything like that.
Yeah, they burn out. That's right.
When people are getting involved in strength, it's kind of, it's pretty cool. Like what you mentioned, you can do anything with a beginner lifter or a novice because everything works. Whereas and that's pretty cool. But then it's still also pretty cool that if you're started lifting when you were 18 and you're 80 and still trying to get some PBs relative to where you're at age-wise, that's still pretty cool, as opposed to being 80 and then looking back and thinking, oh yeah, do you remember when I lifted that weight and you've never touched that weight again? I think there was quite a lot of topics and tangents that we've covered that we've covered there. The last question that I like to ask, maybe from a client's point of view or a coach's point of view, in terms of training, in terms of being able to run a business and having the quality of service, like what you've mentioned, and that level, that standard of professionalism, if you like, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
That's a great question. I think being very self-aware is really important. Being at a point where you don't surround yourself with yes men. Is that a term you guys use over there too?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be surrounded by people who are just going to tell me how great I am. And yes, man, I have to be surrounded by people who challenge me to make me better, that will call me out when I'm not. And to have that culture of people around you to do that. And then for some of your listeners, you're not going to have that, like you're out on an island somewhere, and that's okay too. For them, and really for everybody as well, it's a never-ending pursuit of knowledge. Like, we've never arrived. I haven't arrived as a strength coach. I haven't arrived as a CEO. I mentioned, I went through a hard federal lawsuit a couple of years ago. It was awful. But I'm thankful that I've gone through it, because now I have the experience. I know what it's like to get sued. And that sounds crazy, but it's like, getting sued is terrifying the first time you get sued, because you just don't know what it is like, raising money or bringing on investors or doing things like some of those things that you've never done to get out of your comfort zone. By the way, I'm not telling people to do that. I'm very much more pro coach people out of your garage for as long as you can, for as cheaply as you can, until you can't do it anymore, and then go find I think you do this cheap. Don't go get loans, don't go get business, but part of that even comes from that never-ending pursuit of knowledge. So the combination of, I am constantly reading, listening to audible books, listening to podcasts, not for enjoyment, to make me smarter, right? I'm always reading one fiction book at night so that I can turn my brain off. So it's on my little Kindle Paperwhite, and I can't read business books, or I'm also like really into theology and stuff. So I can't read that stuff at night because my brain will go nuts. And so I do have the thing that I'm able to kind of check out on, or my wife and I have usually a TV show that we're watching Ted Lasso or something. It's like, we love Ted Lasso. It takes our mind off, it's just a sweet show. And we try to even watch that kind of stuff. Not because it's Pollyanna-ish, but because the rest of my life is crazy and stressful.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I try to constantly learn, which means being very self-aware that you haven't arrived and that you're not the smartest person on earth at any subject. So we are constant learners. And then two, setting a group of support network up of people who will not just constantly tell you that you're the greatest, because it will turn into a cult of personality. By the way, if you're trying to grow a business that actually is valuable, it can't be based on you, because if you leave, it dies. And so one of the things that was really important for me for years as Barbell Logic is like, if I have a car accident today, Barbell Logic still goes on and does just fine. My family's still supported. My coaches are still supported. My clients still get, our clients, not literally my clients, but the clients at Barbell Logic still continue to get coaching. The academy reels, like all those things happen because it's not a cult of personality. And I think that I don't have a great message for the coaches who are like, I just want to have 100,000 followers on Instagram. Dude, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have don't even have 10,000 followers on Instagram, but I'm running a company making millions of dollars. Which one would you rather have? You want 100,000 followers on Instagram and be broke, or you want 10,000 followers on Instagram and make millions of dollars? And I don't say that in an arrogant way at all. It's been 15 hard years of business ownership to get here, and it doesn't come easy. But I can tell you this, that like that time wasted on social media, that's time wasted. Read books, listen to podcasts, listen to Audible, talk to people who've been there before, pick their brain. Don't have imposter syndrome, and don't be so competitive that you can't reach out to other coaches that you potentially respect, even if they're competitors, and ask them how they would handle a client or coach a client or where your struggles are, and talk to them about the same thing. I'm about to do the same thing with, there are 4 or 5 massive online coaching businesses in the world. My goal is over the next 2 quarters to fly out to every one of them, meet their CEOs, and have no agenda. Just go get a coffee or a beer with them and just be like, hey, this actually doesn't have to be a we hate each other. And we don't hate anybody. Like, there's no bad blood there. But I think that's good for the industry, and it's good for the person, and it's good for your business.
Absolutely. So, I think that was some really good sort of nuggets of wisdom to share there, because I always try, and questions when I get asked from other coaches or clients, the as the podcast has grown, to try and get people such as yourself to show that it's not just a case of, you mentioned there about followers. It's not all about followers. A common theme throughout our entire chat was, the quality of service. Can you have that trust, that buy-in that you're having from there, and not having that thing of, well, do you know who I am? I've got X amount of followers. Well, that don't mean anything if you're not coaching anybody, if you're not, refining your skill of coaching, and also learning, because, that phrase of, if you're the smartest person in the room, going to another room, continue learning, because, all those answers aren't from there. And, we touched on it a little bit earlier in the chat, in terms of trying to learn from other people, other businesses, because that's how you get better and develop. And other people are going to have better ideas. If everyone just said, yeah, Steve, that's a good idea, it might be the worst idea ever, and it might be a little bit more of a hindrance. Whereas that's right. I don't think being challenged is necessarily a bad thing. That's how you get better. And there's going to be other people out there that are going to have better ideas. And, I think the whole thing, in terms of, like what you mentioned about, you going to visit the other CEOs, it's much better to be collaborative, rather than, just be, nope, this is us behind this fence, that's it, we're not doing anything, because you're limiting how you can grow. That's right. Thanks a lot, Matt, for taking the time to jump on. Of course, man. Loads of good things you chatted about there. If anyone has any questions from what we've chatted about, either want to check out your podcast content, get involved in coaching, or, if there's coaches there who are looking for information in terms of the products that you've got coming up to improve coaching, where can people find you or reach out to you? Yeah, the easiest is just to go to the website, barbellogic.com. And, we're easy to find. You can Google Barbell Logic, just put Barbell Logic in, and it'll pop up. And I think we own every URL that is, barbell-logic.com, barbellogic.com. We've got all that. So easy to find. And then you can read about all that stuff on the website. But then we also have we've got a really real person who works for us, not somebody who's out in the middle of nowhere. That's a chat feature on our website. And so you can actually chat with one of our coaches. Our director of client experience, Nikki Berman, is incredible. She loves to do phone calls that we just call the Block experience. So if you just want to kind of get a taste of what Block is, an academy, what the academy is, or what online coaching is, with no hard sales push at all, just somebody who genuinely, her entire role is to make sure that the client experience is outstanding, then you could just hop on that chat, and you can request a call and do a call, and they'll set it up and do a Zoom call and walk you through that stuff. So we've tried to, again, even make that stuff, be very generous with our time. So yeah, go to Barbell Logic. You can find everything you need there. The podcast is there. Of course, the Barbell Logic YouTube channel. Search anything you want to know, and you don't even have to, how to squat. You probably don't even have to put how to squat Barbell Logic. You can probably just put how to anything, how to do a
how to barbell row, how to RDL, and certainly if you do Barbell Logic, we've got every video on that. So that's another great place to start, especially if you don't have a lot of time and you just want to watch, like, let's see what these guys are about in little 4 or 5 minute chunks. That's a good place to go. The podcast, again, great. There's I think season 1 is the getting started series. So if you're like, I want to understand some of these, like, why is strength important and all that sort of stuff, which is probably pretty juvenile compared to what your listeners are probably used to. But it's a good philosophical overview. If you've got family or friends or you're trying to get them to convince them to strength train, that's a good place to start on that season 1. And then, like I said, season 6 on the minimum effective dose class is a great place if you're just trying to really understand, what do I do with programming when programming stops working. But we got a ton of great podcasts out there as well. And then again, great articles, great ebooks on everything. I mean, really ebooks on everything. And all that stuff is free. So that's just everything's at the website. You can find out anything you want to know. And again, would love to have people sign up as clients. First month is 100% free. There's no contract. There's no catch. Try us out. See what you think. It's a great place to go.
Awesome. 100% for everyone listening. If you haven't already looked at Barbell Logic, 100% check them out. I know for myself, having followed Matt's podcast for a long, long time now, there's some really, really useful information on there. Thanks a lot, Matt, for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks, brother.